Hello, everyone. I believe we have started. Let me just double check. Yes, I think we have started, everyone. Good evening, and thanks all for being here. And for some of you, it is good afternoon and good morning. And happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I hope it's been a wonderful day, and I hope it's been a really good family celebration, and I hope it's been great meals and a lovely, relaxing time, pleasant time. Yeah, just give me a one in the chat, of course, to let me know that my audio is coming through. You know how good I am at actually messing up my audio. That's one of my prime technical skills. Amazing. I used to build really advanced security systems, but I always forget to fix my YouTube audio. Okay, that's good. So, Sergeant Grinch, welcome. Quinn Blessed, XYZ, always good to have you. Good to see you again. I'm glad you had a good lunch, but I sympathize with you on the need to have that nap. Villainous, very welcome. Andrew, good to see you. Francisco, Pedro, BBB, Conospiros, Mick M, of course. Horse, of course. Cannot forget. Yeah. So I hope Albania's doing well. Okay, just Janice. So guys, thanks all for being here. Just wanted to show you, this here is a list of, it's a little hard to read, but this is 42, these are 42 presentations that are either begun, half finished, or close to being finished. So I've been doing a lot of work in the background. Actually, this one is done. Well, as an article it was done, but this very first one, I follow the Bible. It's actually something I was writing a longer talk on. So I've got 42 here, and then I've got another 115. So I've got a bunch of them, and I've got a few more stuff here. So yeah, so there's a lot of these that I still want to do and present. The point of this talk, which is Scientific Paganism, the subtitle I have here on my slide is When 6th Century BC Philosophical Squabbles Became Science, is to show that what is often presented as scientific or science, and this atheist idea that science is materialistic, is actually a pagan idea from 2600 years ago, 2200 years ago. It is nothing new. It is nothing original. It was pagan then. It is pagan now, even if you slap the word science on top of it. There will be a second part to this. I've got a follow-up to this. And the reason for this is that we've been working through logic and scholasticism. And we are working now towards the Catholic Church. We're working towards Pius X. I'm kicking that off in January, on the 7th of January, Sunday evening, with Mel. And he wrote about the synthesis of all heresies. And we need to understand, because I've been reading a lot of his works, we need to understand what are these heresies that he was speaking of. Because they are a synthesis, certainly, but what are the individual components? What are the parts? What are the original sources of these heresies? And this is one of them. He names names, he names particular heresies, he names particular ideologies, he names particular ideas. We need to understand these. We need to know exactly what they are. We need to be able to identify them. And Pius X calls them, these are our enemies. These are enemies of the church. You need to know your enemy. Barrington, very welcome. 1278, very welcome. What's my opinion on Napoleon? I'm watching the movie tomorrow evening. My opinion on Napoleon, opportunist. I don't know that much about the guy. I really don't know that much about him, but I probably do a look into him at some point. The only sort of brief overlap I've had with him is with the what happened in France. Good grief, the name has just escaped me. When he took over the French government after the collapse of the French Revolution. Pedro Jr. says, everything in one of these series is new, and it is scary and fascinating the way you connect these old and evil ideas to the modern world. I love these, by the way. Thank you very much. Glad to hear it. Welcome, Dragon. Always good to see you. Damian Kuzmich, good to see you. So, yeah. Now, of course, we're starting to see overlap. We're starting to see connections between these. We're starting to see none of these new ideas are that new. They're old ideas. They're just repackaged. And of course, error will always lead to error, and people will put their own personal stamp on it. So you have these variations, but it's variations on the same theme. Yes, they love the pagan philosophers. The Enlightenment thinkers of the Enlightenment era, but also the French Revolution, also loved these pagan philosophers. It is pagan philosophy. We're going to look at that today. So next week, I should do a more thorough, shall we say, scientific overview of it in terms of explaining the errors within this. But here's just to look at some of the history. Ancient pagan Greeks. Yes, that is true. I haven't been to Greece yet. Okay, so let me begin. So very welcome, Nicodemus. Right, let's jump in and get my mouse pointer up. Excellent. Right, scientific paganism. When 6th century BC philosophical squabbles became science. Some of you will have seen this slide before, but for those who are new, you may not be familiar with this. So we are going to briefly touch on humanism and atheism, which effectively, for our purposes, are the same thing. And we need to go back to 5th century BC paganism. So we're looking at a period between roughly 6 centuries BC to 2 centuries BC, so roughly in that period. And this is from a book, or rather, a thesis written in 1935 called The Humanism of Charles Francis Potter and Roy Wood Sellers by Abner James Langley of Boston University. And he writes in, this is very important, this comes up all the time, you'll find these ideas coming up all the time. The term can be used to describe the intellectual movement of the 5th century BC in Greece. This was initiated by the sophists and carried on by Socrates. The spirit of this movement is well expressed in that famous maxim given to posterity by Protagoras, where he said that man is the measure of all things. That phrase is very important. This is very important to humanists. It is very important to atheists. But there's more to this than we might be aware of, and we need to understand. The reason I'm putting these together is that if you're a Christian, you need to understand these philosophies are all designed to destroy Christianity. They're all designed to undermine the church, because once you reject that particular worldview, you must find another worldview. So they steal pieces of it, but because they don't have the truth, they reject the logos. They are built on a foundation of error. Their premises are flawed. So they've got some truth and they've got a lot of error. All the best lies have a little bit of truth. But also, there's something else you need to understand. So it's not just the rejection of Christianity and the church. There's also a worldview and a way of thinking that comes along with being a Christian. And this is the worldview that was ultimately developed by St. Thomas Aquinas and the Scholastics in the Middle Ages. And these philosophers ultimately, especially within the Enlightenment, are rejecting that form of logic. They're rejecting rigorous logic. So understand, they're not only rejecting the church, they're rejecting logic. Logic comes from the logos. God is the logos. Logic. That word gives us logic. So understand, you are not only rejecting Jesus, you're not only rejecting God, you're not rejecting the church and Christianity only, you are also rejecting logic. You need to understand this. We need to look at the thinking that goes into these really insane ideologies. So the ancient Greeks were originally or generally considered pagans. Now, these here are pictures from the French Revolution. You'll notice those in the French Revolution, those leaders and enlightened thinkers of the French Revolution, the Enlightenment, they thought of themselves as these pagan thinkers. They actually cast themselves in that light. In fact, they worshipped the cult of reason, and this was their goddess, right? They had the goddess here that they reasoned. So we've spoken about that in the French Revolution talks. So they stylized themselves as these ancient Greeks and Romans. And in fact, there's a very famous historian called Peter Gay who writes a very detailed historical appraisal of that period, and he called it the rise of the new paganism, because it is a rise of the new paganism. Paganism is a broad term used to describe non-Abrahamic religions, particularly those that were prevalent before the rise of Christianity. The ancient Greeks practiced a polytheistic religion. They worshipped various gods and goddesses such as Zeus, Athena, Apollo, and Aphrodite. So remember, they had a whole pantheon of gods. They had elaborate rituals. They had temples and festivals dedicated to their deities, which formed a significant part of their cultural and religious practices. Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, while they were influenced by these cultural and religious ideas that were present in their time, they made contributions to philosophy that went beyond the traditional pagan religious framework. Now, the Enlightenment, often deemed by atheists to be modern and scientific, as we've learned, the French Revolution, as an expression of this, was brutal, sadistic, psychopathic, inhumanly barbaric, and a precursor to what happened with, those guys in World War II, right? So they prefigured a lot of what happened there. So atheists love to think of it as modern and scientific, but as we know, when it was expressed within the French Revolution, this was a celebration of pagan culture. The French Revolution, the Enlightenment, was a revival of pagan culture. Yes, logos has many meanings. Yeah, it definitely has many, many meanings. Right, so let's see if modern science has a perspective that, while supposedly modern, has a pagan overtone. I thought I fixed all the typos. I see I have a typo here. I checked especially. The gods have had different names in different countries. Yes, for instance, Hermes was Mercury, right? So the Greek Hermes was the Roman Mercury. And of course, these gods made their way into other cultures through trade networks and so on. So you had Diana would be called Aphrodite maybe somewhere else. So you had these names, but the same god, roughly the same qualities across different cultures and times. Right, so let's talk about Carl. So Carl says here, how is it that hardly any major religion has looked at science and concluded, this is better than we thought. The universe is much bigger than our prophets said. It is grander, more subtle, and more elegant. I personally think Christians tend to look at the world as awesome and the universe as awesome. But he says, no, instead, these religious believers say, no, 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 my God is a little God, a tiny God, and I want him to stay that way. He's probably never been to a church, but okay. A religion old or new that stressed the magnificence of the universe as revealed by modern science might be able to draw forth reserves of reverence and awe hardly tapped by the conventional faiths. Sooner or later, such a religion will emerge. Now, here he's speaking of humanism, which is the scientific religion, the replacement of Christianity, specifically within the context that I've addressed it in the past, the replacement of the Catholic Church. And don't forget, socialism, which brings us to communism. Communism is meaning universal. What does Catholic mean? Universal. See the parallel? This is Carl Sagan in the pale blue dot, the vision of the human future in space. Now, universities began as religious institutions, which most people don't speak about, don't realize, don't know. Now, C.S. Lewis wrote, men became scientific because they expected law in nature, and they expected law in nature because they believed in a legislator, which is odd because atheists and, of course, materialists believe in a random universe that has no order, no structure, randomness. How can you have law in a random universe? Now, the term laws of nature actually comes from Christian medieval thinking, the term laws of nature, because God is ordered. God is not pagan, doesn't conform to the pagan rules of just being random. He conforms to logic. So science can purify religion from error and superstition. Religion can purify science from idolatry and false absolutes. I'll repeat that. Science can purify religion from error and superstition. Religion can purify science from idolatry and false absolutes. Each can draw the other into a wider world, a world in which both can flourish. This pagan statement is by Pope John Paul II. Actually, hold on, I'm looking. There's no paganism in that. That's actually quite a sensible statement. Now, I'm going to be using a fair number of quotes from Catholics, or I'm offering a Catholic perspective, for the simple reason that people annoy me when they speak about the Catholic Church as pagan, because, man, I've gone looking for the paganism. I haven't found it yet. I'm not sure how a crucifix is pagan. Maybe some intelligent Christian who says that can let me know exactly how a crucifix is pagan, so that I can then use that information to go and look it up and then prove how you're actually being an ass. But that's a slightly different off-topic topic. So what you've got within the Catholic Church is a synthesis of faith and reason. The two support each other. Communist catechism. Yes, exactly. Yes, the Communist Confession of Faith. Exactly. That's the Communist Manifesto. It was the Communist Confession of Faith. It was the Communist Catechism. Correct. True science and true religion are twin sisters, and the separation of either from the other is sure to prove the death of both. Science prospers exactly in proportion as it is religious, and religion flourishes in exact proportion to the scientific depth and firmness of its basis. Thomas Henry Huxley. Now, we don't know for sure that he actually said this. This is quoted from the close of a recent lecture by Huxley in What Knowledge is of Most Worth? Lectures in Education by Herbert Spencer, delivered at the Royal Institution in 1855, published in the Westminster Review, July 1859, volume 22, collected in Essays on Education and Kindred Subjects, 1911, page 41. That's the citation. Now, of course, Thomas Henry Huxley hated religion, hated Christianity. He was an avowed atheist. He was a huge supporter of Darwin, and he created the word, even though he was a rabid, toxic atheist who hated the church, he coined the term agnostic, because he called himself an agnostic, even though he himself was not an agnostic. But it was a convenient, shall we say, shield to hide behind. Now, why he said this, I don't know, because he says some completely opposite statements at other times. I've covered this in my Darwin series, where I cover Thomas Henry Huxley, and he says things that are very anti the church. Huxley also said, extinguished theologians lie about the cradle of every science as the strangled snakes besides that of Hercules. Someone was mentioning Hercules earlier. So, dead theologians lie about the cradle of every science as the strangled snakes besides that of Hercules. So in other words, science has killed all of the priests. Science has killed religion. I don't know how these two statements actually, they contradict each other, but yeah, no one said atheism makes any sense. Pope Pius XII, in his encyclical Humani Generis, acknowledged the importance of taking positive sciences into account, particularly when dealing with clearly proved facts. Now, 20 million books were produced in the first 50 years after Johann Gutenberg published his printed Bible in 1455. That's in a book called The Genesis of Science. So it's very, very odd that 20 million books were published between 1455 and roughly the year 1500, right? Roughly the year, just into the 16th century by, yeah, incredible. The science and this, and remember, the first book printed was the Bible. Okay, so some background. So atheism, sophism, and materialism. So the belief of the sophists, and those are the guys we mentioned in the beginning, who said man is the measure of all things, was that all thinking is dependent purely on the senses, the five senses, right? Taste, touch, smell, vision, so on. And personal impressions, the impressions you form, the subjective impressions you form in your mind. Shield to prevent the need to explain yourself, agnosticism. Yes, Villainous. So they look for the Saganism in Catholicism, they can't find it, yeah. Right, so the sophists believe that all thinking, right, is dependent on the senses only and your personal subjective impressions, leading to the absence of any objective criteria for personal behavior except for societal norms. There needs to be some kind of order and structure in society. All right, so the sophists specialized in rhetoric, and the sophists were, shall we say, professional educators more than they were philosophers. They flourished as a result of a special need at the time for Greek education. There were famous sophists like Protagoras, roughly 420 BC, from Abderian Thrace. And there was a man called Gorgias, we'll come across him again, right, from about 400 BC, from Leontini in Sicily, Hippias from Elis in the Peloponnesos, and Prodicus from the island of Chios. Now, Gorgias, Hippias, Prodicus, and Protagoras, all of them are sort of 5th century BC. They cultivated the art of defending or attacking a thesis by means of argument. So they developed a way of what's called disputation, how to undermine an argument, how to undermine logic, how to use language in a way that was grammatically correct, that sounded good, but was actually false, specious, that was questionable, not true. The whole aim is not to find truth. The whole aim is to undermine the argument of the other person and to win. So they cultivated the art of defending or attacking a thesis by means of argument. So this concern for the techniques of argument led to verbal displays of debating skills, what Plato called eristic. In Islam, you've seen Muslim debaters. They use exactly the same technique because they are sophists as well. And it's called adab al-jadal and hiyal. These are the two terms in Islam that describe this. So the Muslims took these on board completely. Now, dawah, exactly. So dawah is made up of various skills, various knowledge. And two of those are adab al-jadal and hiyal, the debating skill and the method of lying. Right? Now, as I've mentioned before, Protestants also developed their own form of scholasticism. But the Protestant form of scholasticism is not the same as that of Aquinas and the Catholic Church. Aquinas was very rigorous about finding truth, whereas the Protestant scholasticism was designed to win arguments and change definitions. Notice, Muslims change the definitions of words, atheists do it, and these sophists did it as well. So, and Protestants do it as well. They change the meaning of words. Most people, Right, greetings from Oslo and welcome, Evan Angel. So, in mysticism, the norms of conduct which govern relations between master and disciple and those between disciples themselves. But, right, this is called adab. Adab is a method, a manner, a habit, a practice. In military science, the plural form of adab is a synonym of hiyal, also known as stratagems in war. This is verbal warfare. It is ideological warfare. It is propaganda warfare. It is the basis of utilizing words for war, to win wars. It is not designed to find truth. It is designed to beat your enemy. Understand you're up against an enemy that is using words to win. Adab al-Jadal, in theology and law, a method of debating in which were discussed questions that were controversial. These were called the disputationists. That's what it means, the controversialists. But it's disputation, exactly as the Protestants define it. It was not a matter of finding the truth, but of convincing the opponent, so it utilizes rhetoric. It wants to be persuasive. Nothing to do with what Muslims do. Move along. Yeah, exactly. Hitler, who knows, but he was a very good orator, so his rhetoric was fantastic, but he practiced art. Hiyal, artifices, devices, expedients, stratagems, the means of evading a thing, evasive language, not answering a question, beating around the bush, playing word games, right? And tricks, right, of beggars or conjurers. In law, it is circumvention of the law, how to get around the rules, how to defy the rules, how to break the rules. Legal devices, the use of legal means for extra-legal ends. Extra-legal means illegal. Very Christopher Hitchens. Yes, Scarlett, you're right. I've watched him debate of, yeah, he doesn't answer the question, he gets on he pounds the rhetoric, pounds his hand on the table. And so notice, this is from the Encyclopedia of Islam. Hiyal is a means of utilizing the law to violate the law. The use of legal means for extra-legal, otherwise illegal, ends. In military science, with synonymous maqa'id and adab, is a technical term for stratagems of war. Understand how this is applied. It is designed to destroy you. It is designed to undermine you. Sophists were instrumental in bringing argumentation to the central position which it came to hold in Greek thought. The Sophists were among the first people anywhere to demand that moral claims be justified by reasons. Moral claims must be justified. Well, can you torture babies? Give me a reason. Otherwise, there's no reason why we can't torture babies. That was their position, and atheists seem to like this idea because they took a whole bunch of this stuff on wholesale. Right, sophistry, noun. Subtly deceptive reasoning or argumentation. Subtly deceptive. The first known use of sophistry is in the 14th century, of the word sophistry. Sophists were ancient Greek teachers of rhetoric and philosophy. Prominent in the 5th century BC. Was it really philosophy, or was it an ideology, a false ideology? That's what we're going to discover. These philosophers were considered clever in their reasoning, but later philosophers, like Plato especially, described them as sham philosophers, out for money, willing to say anything to win an argument. I'm not going to argue with Plato on this. If he said it, he's right. Okay, so that's Plato. Of course, Plato has a very dark side that scholars don't tell us about. Academia seems to have forgotten Plato's dark side. We'll briefly touch on that here. Sophist, from Greek sophistes, wise man or expert, earned a negative connotation as a captious or fallacious reasoner, someone with fallacious, false, flawed reasoning. Sophistry is reasoning that looks plausible on a superficial level but is unsound or used to deceive. We just saw that with adab al-Jadal, within the Muslim sense. Rhetoric in sophistry is the practice of persuasive communication aimed at manipulating and influencing audiences through the skilled use of language and argumentation, often prioritizing style and emotional appeal over truth or reason. So Connor says, always say if you love truth, follow it wherever it leads you. Humble yourself. Truth is singular, not plural. There's one truth, one religion. Don't have preconceived ideas. Oh, good, fine. Right. Of course, we would call this propaganda. The art of winning. So sophistry is the art of winning. It's the art of never being wrong. Heuristic is the practice of engaging in argumentation solely for the purpose of winning. An heuristic person is an argumentative person. They are annoying, they are grating, they are irritating because they are always arguing. They are controversial. Yes. Without regard for the truth or intellectual pursuit. You argue because you like to argue, not because you want truth. This is something that goes contrary to the scholastic method. It involves using deceptive or fallacious tactics that undermine an opponent's argument rather than engaging in genuine dialogue or seeking a collaborative resolution. Heuristic is a form of intellectual dishonesty that prioritizes winning and personal gain over the pursuit of knowledge or the search for truth. Often it's designed to prevent you from finding certain knowledge, from finding certain truths. It wants to force an idea down your throat using rhetoric. These are all things that we need to bear in mind as we start to build on this, because you will start to see how and why this is important. Often characterized with the use of ad hominem attacks, logical fallacies, and manipulation, rather than giving you substantive evidence or thoughtful reasoning. Captious is the tendency or disposition to find fault, to nitpick, to raise objections over trivial matters. It is overly critical thinking. It is nitpicking, finding fault on everything. So someone is looking for reasons to criticize or dispute even when not warranted or insubstantial. Captious individuals will find flaws or weaknesses in others' arguments, in their statements, in their actions, often in a very, nitpicking, argumentative manner, looking for something, anything to attack. It also describes someone who is excessively meticulous or pedantic in their approach, focusing on minor details, minor discrepancies. They're looking at the leaves missing the forest. Now, Gorgias, this guy, the nihilist. Gorgias said nothing exists. Even if something exists, nothing can be known about it. And even if something can be known about it, nothing about it can be communicated to others. I see I just made a typo. Let me go and fix that typo. Oh, knowledge about it can't be. Oops, that was my bad. Actually, that was correct. Yeah, so let me just read. Yeah, nothing exists. Even if something exists, nothing can be known about it. And even if something can be known about it, knowledge about it cannot be communicated to others. That is an incredibly negative view of the world, a completely nihilistic view of the world. Every time you're reading, different people pop up in my head that match these descriptions perfectly. That's good to know, Pedro. As long as I'm hitting a point, and making you think on this. So his perspective reflects a skeptical and what's called a relativistic view, suggesting that our understanding of reality is limited and that objective truth is inaccessible. And there are several major critiques of this. Wait, isn't making the argument of logical fallacies relying, qualifying philosophy? Yeah, it's amazing how they'll use logic to disprove logic. Crazy, huh? So, incoherence. Gorgias' stance is self-defeating and logically inconsistent. So by claiming that nothing exists and that knowledge and communication are impossible, he seems to undermine his own argument, as the act of making these assertions implies the existence of something and the possibility of communication. So instead, it's incoherent. He's not trying to make sense. He's trying to confuse you. He's trying to undermine truth at all costs. Relativism. Gorgias' skepticism and emphasis on the limitations of knowledge is an extreme form of relativism, leading to a nihilistic perspective. And when I get to Pius X, you're going to see this again. This comes up again. And all perspectives become equally valid or invalid. This undermines the possibility of rational discourse and objective understanding. You cannot weigh things and look at their objective value and say this is better than that. There is, because, nothing exists, right? Even Gorgias doesn't exist. Practical implications. His philosophy has negative practical consequences. So by denying the existence of anything and dismissing the value of knowledge and communication, this leads to apathy, indifference. This is often called indifferentism, which is something that happened, of course, during the Enlightenment and afterwards, and this was a problem for the church. And also a lack of engagement with the world, which is kind of what the Gnostics did. It discourages efforts to seek truth, to pursue knowledge, and communicate effectively with others. It causes disruption. It is destructive, it is toxic, it is corrosive. Can you see where this is the start, this is the beginning? And this is tied very much into what atheists do, and we're going to find it is part of this synthesis of all heresies, and we're going to find it inside Protestantism too, sadly. Denial of empirical evidence. Gorgias' skepticism challenges the notion of empirical evidence as a valid basis for knowledge and understanding. Empirical observation and evidence plays a crucial role in our understanding of reality. So by his dismissal, his philosophy is unrealistic and disconnected from the world. Yeah. So it's amazing. You can't know anything about the world. It's not possible to communicate it. But yeah, here he is. It's like postmodernism, isn't it, Andrew? Doesn't it just sound like postmodernism? Isn't that odd? The same old bad ideas come back, right? So philosophy is unrealistic and disconnected from the world. That's what he's saying. We are disconnected from the world. In other words, you're living in your head and only your personal experience is valid. You're on an island, and We'll see how this idea gets played out, because some of these ideas develop over time and they change as different people add different ideas to them, they mix their own ideas, but we'll see the same. Now, Hans-Georg Gadamer says nothing exists except through language. And that's actually a very profound point. That's actually a very, very interesting point. He's a philosopher. So he's a German philosopher that argued, now he tells us logos, the word, is critical. He said that language plays a crucial role in our understanding and experience of reality. His statement that nothing exists except through language can be understood in the context of his hermeneutic philosophy. We'll discuss the word hermeneutic later, which focuses on the interpretation of text and the understanding of meaning. So he emphasizes the significant influence of language on our perception and interpretation. Language shapes what we see, whether we see it or not, whether we value it or not, whether we perceive it, right? How we perceive it, how we interpret it, how we respond to it. Language has a massive impact on our thinking, on our culture. So he argues that language is not merely a tool for communication, but it shapes our understanding of reality itself. According to Gadamer, language is not a neutral medium that conveys meaning, but it is an active force that shapes and constitutes our experience and knowledge. The logos. Do you understand the importance of the word and why these sophists, why these atheists, why these philosophers all want to corrupt the word? All of them corrupt the word, right? The word became flesh. The word, the logos is so important. Gadamer believed that our understanding of the world is always mediated through language. How do you communicate your knowledge of the world? Through language. How do you describe to yourself? Through language. So language frames our thoughts, our concepts, and our interpretations. It enables us to make sense of the world. If our language is corrupted, if our grammar is corrupted, if our understanding is corrupted, our understanding of the world is corrupted, and our description to others of the world is corrupted. That's why we need precise language. In this sense, he suggests that without language, nothing can be understood or known. So yeah, how do we learn the truth? Through the logos. The logos came into the world. So, I mean, you work it out. You connect them. Thems are fighting words. Cuckold, label not present in other cultures. Interesting. So, nothing exists. So the cats I rent to people don't. No, they don't, Connor. So Gadamer does not imply that reality itself is reducible to language alone. He's not saying that. Rather, our access to reality and our ability to interpret and understand it are intertwined with language. Language is a medium through which we construct and communicate meaning, which allows us to engage with the world and share our experiences with others. So the word is very important. Now, who are the pre-Socratic philosophers? And of course, Aristotle. The pre-Socratic philosophers were ancient Greek thinkers who lived before Socrates, pre-Socratic, and such as Thales, or Thales, Anaximander, and Heraclitus. Now, I'm not going to focus a lot on these guys. I'll be talking to some other philosophers at another time. Well, during this. But these people are all very important. I've touched on them in the past. These thinkers rejected traditional mythological explanations and they searched for what they call rational. Now, how you believe the word rational is defined and how they define the word rational may not be the same thing. Remember, same vocabulary, different dictionary. And so they wanted rational explanations based on observable phenomena. They also asked questions about the origins of existence, the variety in nature, and the mathematical description of nature. Now, of course, the mathematical description of nature has come to be nature. The map has become the territory, which is, taking it backwards, putting the cart before the horse. So they sought universal principles to explain nature as a whole and identified problems and paradoxes that became influential in the later studies of math, science, and philosophy. So they had some truth, understand? They had some truth. They understood some of the structure of the world, of nature. Now, Aristotle was a student of Plato and lived during the 4th century BC. Andrew says these new ideologies keep getting older. Yeah, we're going to start seeing how old it is as we unpack this. So Aristotle was a student of Plato. He lives during the 4th century BC, long after the pre-Socratic era. So Aristotle is considered one of the most influential philosophers in Western history, and he made significant contributions to physics, biology, logic, and ethics, or morality, and politics. Very important man. Of course, heavily incorporated into the work of the scholastics and Aquinas, and then developed modern logic, Western thinking. So he expands on the concept of what we call universals. Now, all these terms I'm using will be defined as we go. And with significant contributions to metaphysics, he believed that universals, such as the essence or form of something, exist in particular objects and are not separate entities in themselves. So how can I explain? We will give examples. So I think we'll come to examples of that. But for instance, redness. Okay. Now you might have a red apple, a red car. There might be a red book. You might have a red jacket. You've got these nominalists and others who will tell you that, look, you are perceiving red there. That red is just a peculiar property of that thing on its own. Redness is not something that exists as a universal property which is applied to different objects. So redness is something, when you look at, let's say you look at an apple, and I give you another apple and another apple. These are different apples, different kinds of apples, from different places, different farms. They're all different, but you can tell these are apples. There's an appleness about them. That appleness is a universal. Whereas these rationalists, these nominalists and others will tell you, these materialists, whatever, this group here will tell you, no, that's an apple thing, and you've identified this as an apple thing. That's just a convenient label you're applying to things that somehow accidentally kind of resemble each other. But they're not actually part of a universal. There's no universal because there's no God, you see. There's no God. So there's nothing that made these qualities. There's no universe. It's all just random individual things that have no connection to each other. Yeah. So yeah, we applied the name to that color, but there's a universal idea of color and there's a universal idea of redness. So when you see apples, you can tell, hey, that's an apple. You don't have to be, but they don't see it like that. So this is a completely opposite worldview, and we'll see what the implications of that are for morality as well. So his theory of hylomorphism, which considers the combination of matter and form in the existence of objects, was a significant advancement in understanding the nature of reality and the relationship between universals and particulars. It's really backwards. Yes, Pedro, it is backwards. These terms, I've got a part 2 of this, which I'll do probably in a week, and then we'll explain all of these terms and hopefully tie it all together. If you can follow me on this whole philosophy here. Because I want to present this as how it is juxtaposed and how it confronts the church, how it confronts Christianity, because this is important if you want to understand what we're dealing with here. So, and this is important. These ideas are being used to attack and undermine the church by Christian morality. Atheists utilize this. Others utilize this. These modernists utilize this. So universals and particulars. A particular is a particular kind of apple. And the universal is this appleness, this apple thing. It's a form that exists in the universe. And then you've got these expressions of apples. We can see this appleness through these things. Or dogs. Dogs are so different. Dogness is a universal. And then Chihuahuas versus Great Dane. You can see they're dogs, but whereas, of course, there's no universals according to these people. Let's continue. Socrates. Philosophy is divided into 2 periods, before and after Socrates. Socrates had significant impact on Western thought. So he dedicates his life to examining the concept of virtue, the dictatorship of relativism. Very well said, Connor. All philosophy is a footnote to Plato, said Alfred North Whitehead, the philosopher himself. And this refers to Plato being Socrates' most respected student. So this led to the emergence of sophists. They are teaching rhetoric and oratory, so good speaking, right? Like Mr. Mustache, that guy was a good orator, right? Everyone said Barack Obama was a great orator, right? So they used powerful rhetoric. They were good speakers. And logical argument in exchange for payment. Now, this wasn't considered good form back in the day, that you took payment for education, but they did it for the money. So the negative phrase, mere sophistry, describes arguments that lack substance, that are manipulative, that are flawed, false, deceitful. Right? Socrates engages in debates with the sophists and he criticizes their practices. However, he also could be considered a sophist before Socrates. BS. Good point. Hello there, Cascara BS. Right. Now, he can be considered a sophist because he understands this, right? But there's some differences. Unlike the sophists, he did not charge for his teaching and was more focused on finding genuine knowledge rather than solely teaching logical argumentation, although he was very skilled in that area. So he was known for his wittiness, his irony and eloquence. He possessed his oratory, in other words. So he possesses insightful thoughts and he delves deep into his subjects. Now, according to the Greeks' belief in the Delphic oracle, who spoke on behalf of the gods, Socrates was declared the wisest man alive. Apple in Latin is malus, malicious, malice. Interesting. So Socrates employed what's called the Socratic method, which involved questioning his conversation partners until he discovered logical inconsistencies or paradoxes that disproved their argument. Now, let's have a look at Plato, his most famous student. In legitimizing state socialism, Plato also plays an inglorious role. Plato's politeia, on the one hand, is aristocratic. It is led by the philosophers, who are recruited from the warrior caste. And Bulgakov, this is a Russian I've spoken about in my atheist series on socialism. This is another crazy atheist, socialist philosopher, crazy man. Bulgakov has pointed out that the term philosophers in the context of the politeia can also be translated as the righteous or the saints. So Plato designs an ideal state whose main purpose is the perfection of man. Don't take that the wrong way. Muhammad was the perfect man. Those guys, those Germans from 1939, they were looking to create the perfect man, the Übermensch. The Russians, the communists, were trying to create the perfect Soviet man. See, the perfect socialist man with the perfectly indoctrinated mind. See, so he was, unfortunately, these ideas come from Plato's dark side, right? And these philosophers, now, of course, in today's world, we would call them scientists. These scientists are the righteous or the saints. Do you understand? These natural scientists of the Enlightenment era were the righteous ones. They were the saints. Do you understand the implication here? They're utilizing pagan philosophy and calling themselves the saints, the leaders of men, the righteous ones. So Plato held the opinion that the state can fulfill its pastoral task best within the framework of a state socialist form of organization. In other words, Plato was a socialist. Plato recommended socialism. Plato liked his little bit of totalitarianism. This is the bit they forgot to teach you in college. So one day if I dive into this, Plato said some pretty bad things that you realize that the Marx and Lenin kind of just took some of those ideas straight out of Plato and yeah, that sounds like a good plan. Let's go murder a bunch of people. Put them in gulags. Nothing new under the sun. Yes. So, yeah. Now, Socrates, of course, you could say God showed us the perfect man. Yes, Villainous. Good point. So, Socrates primarily focused on moral philosophy. Oh, good grief. You know what? Okay, let me just take this away. I have made a wrong mistake here. I've messed up my slide again. I always do this. So, now this method, okay, considered the foundation of Socrates' philosophy, this question and answer, is believed to have originated from Zeno, a student of Parmenides, but it gained widespread recognition through Socrates. So he focused on moral philosophy. He was not interested in subjects like mathematics or science. He dedicated his attention to exploring the quality of the soul, and his philosophy was about guiding individuals to live a virtuous life. But Plato's worship of these academics of today, I wonder why. Yeah, we're going to start seeing where all this goes, Pedro. I hope this is not dull. I'm trying to lay out a lot of history and a lot of philosophy so you can start to see how these ideas, and you'll see these ideas go downhill pretty fast. So in his quest for virtue, Socrates engages in discussions about various virtues such as wisdom, justice, courage, piety, and others. His mission is to correct false beliefs and emphasize that people should prioritize the well-being of their souls over material possessions. And his famous statement, wealth does not bring goodness, but goodness brings wealth, exemplifies this belief. Thank you, Scarlett. So, Socrates saw himself as serving the city of Athens and its citizens by challenging and correcting their erroneous thinking patterns. As a man of principle, he lives according to what he believes, right? So he's not interested in material possessions or physical beauty. Apparently he was known to be poor and ugly, and he took no money for his teaching, unlike the sophists who did. How does one make a wrong mistake? I do that all the time, infinite reach. So now, he dedicates his life to understanding the virtues so that he could be more virtuous. Now, of course, he teaches that we must practice virtue. To be more virtuous, we must practice virtue. And this would be to do good works, right? To learn how to do good, we must do good. To learn how to be a better person, we need to practice being good. In other words, there's an objective good. You can achieve this by doing good things, that you have a moral sense. Now, of course, these other philosophies reject that. So, you could also teach others how to be virtuous too. And he thought that being virtuous leads to true happiness. This would sound vaguely Christian even, the ethical moral here. So he was uncompromising in his belief about the right way to live. And of course, he was then condemned to death. He does sound kind of Christian, doesn't he? These are pagans, but understand, they are starting to hit on the truth. They're starting to come upon the truth. Now, if you concentrated on Plato and Marx and academia, then you don't need to be bothered by God's expectations. Yes, exactly. So, materialism. This is a philosophical idea. Is it even a philosophy? Well, let's just use the word philosophical idea for now, and let's just say it's an ideology. It's an error. Let's call it that. So this is the belief that physical matter is the fundamental substance of the world, and that everything, including consciousness and mental states, can be explained in terms of material interactions. In other words, this would be atoms knocking into each other. This would be chemicals sloshing about and slamming into each other in your bloodstream and in your nervous system and in your brain. All of these interactions obey physical laws, and there's an element of randomness. There's a little element of chance that also, now you'll notice that you read Darwinism and you read about atheism and they speak of their materialism, that they do talk of this randomness. And this idea goes back, 2,500 years, back to these pagans. Right. So now, this is a pre-Socratic philosophy. And for most of history, this is a minor view. Now, this view is the popular elite or academic view now by these philosophers, these saints, the righteous, the scientists. See, humanists spread propaganda. Gosh, my camera. I need to fix my camera. Let me just fix my camera. Lately, it had an update and it's doing some weird things. Let me disable that again. It keeps enabling itself. Don't know why. So, now, this view that everything is material, that everything is simply just matter colliding into matter, and matter somehow creates consciousness, dead matter creates life, this is the current academic view. Humanists spread propaganda to identify materialism with science itself. I covered this in my talks on socialism. Right? Humanists say that to be scientific, you must be materialistic. There is no other way to do science. Now, I've mentioned this, I've done this before on my talks, but there's a paper called An Analysis of the Argumentation Within the Religious Humanist Movement by Richard Crawford, page 78. I've covered this in one of my talks on socialism and on humanism, religious humanism, right? And I have covered that before, so at length I've got a couple of episodes on that, which goes into detail on the propaganda that they started publishing in the 60s through to the late 80s on this exact topic, right? Now, materialism and science are not the same thing. Science comes from a word that means knowledge or knowing. For example, historical materialism, back to materialism, is a theory developed by Karl Marx. Plato, as we learned, might have something to do with socialism, just a little bit. Now, I'll explain this more fully in my next series, right? Historical materialism. But this is interesting, you see, because now they are speaking of, here they contradict themselves, and you see the desperation, and they hope you don't catch the little sleight of hand that they're doing. They've got this idea that everything is just atoms colliding, following strict rules of nature. So if like a billiard ball hits a billiard ball, this one smacks in and maybe rolls away, and this one rolls on, right? But there's a purpose, and that purpose is based on physics, on something hitting something mechanically, physically, and then this thing moves, and that creates your responses, your reactions, your emotions, your feelings, your etc., etc. And there's no purpose. It's all random. Right? It's entirely random. However, historical materialism says materialism, but then the historical materialism implies and states there is a purpose to this, that the material, that history, that time somehow wants to move towards a purpose, an upliftment. Now, we know that everything moves towards decay. Everything moves towards chaos, right? What's the word? Gosh, I forgot the term where everything sort of like breaks down, right? And here they're saying that somehow some force keeps this moving on an upward trajectory. It has a purpose. Now we say God has a purpose. Entropy. Thank you very much. Entropy. Yeah. And they're saying that, hold on, no. Entropy is not the purpose. On the one hand, atheists and scientists will tell you the universe is moving towards entropy. On the other hand, they'll tell you it has a purpose, a higher purpose. It's progressive. And Marx is telling us, no, it has a purpose. Where's the purpose coming from? What mind? Purpose comes from minds. How can random matter knocking into matter and moving into entropy develop purpose? It's completely incoherent. It is contradictory. It is complete garbage. But here it is. We'll discuss that in another show. So, natural science is a method to acquire knowledge about the natural world without claiming that it is the only existing reality. And of course, our philosophers of the Middle Ages, those were the early scientists. Right, that form of thinking developed into modern science. Now, there's no reason with respect to the practice of science or the history or the meaning of science that it aligns with this narrow metaphysical perspective of materialism. In fact, materialism denies metaphysics. So metaphysics, we'll probably define it as we go, but when you think of truth, when you think of goodness, those are not material concepts. That is not matter extending into space. If this is my arm, that's matter extending into space, right? But thoughts, emotions, logic, maths, equations, morals, how do we have those? How is that matter extending into space? That is a problem, and I'll discuss that in the next one. But you see, so, and materialism denies metaphysics. It denies that these things exist. So they claim that these things only exist because they arise out of matter slamming into matter by chance. So the universe has a plan. Mass media rhetoric popularized by Marvel with characters like Eternity. Yes, exactly. So materials don't understand the first mover principle. The one that moves doesn't need to be moved. Exactly. Because you've got, what's the word? You've got entropy, but also you've got inertia. So yes, understand, this is an incoherent idea, right? So that's why the word mind is so problematic to the scientists of today. Yes, exactly, Pedro. So pervasive materialism and Gorgias's ghost. So materialism has become deeply ingrained within the Western educational institutions, despite their origins in religious institutions. Universities come from Christian institutions, but now they've been taken over and they've become materialist, atheistic institutions. During the 19th and 20th centuries, materialism infiltrated and now dominates academic philosophy. They deliberately did so. So regardless of the specific academic discipline, physics, psychology, or sociology, materialist assumptions underpin the field and are very hard to challenge today. So in psychology, materialism denies, crazily enough, materialism in psychology denies the existence of the very subject you claim to be studying, which is the mind and consciousness. So we come back to Gorgias, nothing exists. And if it did, you can't communicate it, but nothing exists. You don't exist. I don't exist. So who the heck's talking to me? Shut up. So as a psychologist, this blatant contradiction should undermine your acceptance of materialism. It fails to make logical sense, and it contradicts your own area of expertise. The scientific materialist wants to say that only those things that you can touch, taste, feel, measure, weigh, or can do experiments on, only those things matter. Only those things exist. The only things that exist are things that are open to our 5 sense impressions. Yet, we ourselves are not available to our sense impressions. We experience ourselves as free agents and as conscious beings directly. How do I taste? You don't. Your self doesn't taste like anything, right? So yeah, basically, if these guys had to rewrite certain famous phrases, they'd say something like, I stink, therefore I am. Because, according to them, thinking is an illusion. It is a delusion. The idea that you are a self that exists is an illusion. It is your mind deluding you? Whatever. Quite literally, that's where they go. Now, these guys are more contradictory than Muslims, yeah. So materialists say that's an illusion. Your consciousness are not real. Only sense impressions are real. When submitted to reason, materialism as a philosophy collapses immediately. So yeah, thanks God. I'm glad you enjoyed. Nose runs and feet smell. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's all topsy-turvy. Yeah, so yeah, and yeah, I definitely am. I definitely am. Yeah, okay, so moving on. Now, if materialism is true, your thoughts, your direct experiences, love, justice, natural laws, logical principles, the laws of nature, right? Mathematical principles, none of these things are real. What is of supreme importance to civilization and to virtually all of us, right? For the materialist, does not exist. They are denying the existence of all these things. Materialists, atheists, claim to use logic. They claim to be supremely logical. Yet their philosophy denies that logic exists. It denies that the mind exists, even though they claim to be rational minds using rational thinking. Yet they claim the mind does not exist. Do you see the shades of Gorgias here? Do you see how this irrational pagan philosophy has now become science? The logic of being stupid. Yes, supremely stupid. Nothing new under the sun. Look what Solomon wrote 3,000 years ago. right? Because we were born by mere chance, and hereafter we shall be as though we had never been. Yeah, okay, there you go. Depends on who you ask. So, okay, guys, that's why my kids came home from college dumber, says Catherine M. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope they gave you a refund. I'd send them a bill. This is why I laugh at atheists that say we have to evolve to that morality. We have evolved to that morality as if matter colliding with matter alone makes a metaphysical truth. Catherine M., I'm so sorry. Yeah, I've heard this story from other people, and it's frustrating. Yeah, it's really frustrating. I didn't go to college. I dropped out early on, and yeah, I had to wear gloves because it took me a long time to learn to walk upright and fix my knuckles. So now they claim that the only things that exist are material objects, and at their most basic and rudimentary existence, atoms. Atoms are the building blocks of everything. So this is a very depressing view of reality. So there's no reason to think it's true at all. There's no reason to believe them because reasons themselves are not material objects. They have to define everything in terms of matter extending into space. A reason, logic, an argument, their rationality is not a material object. It is, understand, it's completely insane. This is backwards. It doesn't even make sense, right? It's completely just irrational. It's nonsense. So, is it compatible with science? No. Humanists have, welcome Mike Simal, greetings from Portugal, welcome. So, humanists have attempted to merge materialism with science, calling it the only path to scientific understanding. Science is fundamentally opposed to materialism. Natural laws are not material. Science relies on the natural laws of the universe, right? It believes in those natural laws. Those natural laws are not material. Therefore, science is anti-materialistic. Because how can natural laws of logic are not physical things extending into space? So they're not atoms extending into space, globbed into objects. Understand? There's a complete disconnect here. This is irrational from the get-go because it's pagan. So science is opposed to materialism, and of course natural laws all transcend the realm of material objects. Logic transcends the realm of material objects. Truth, love, justice, fairness, all of these things are not material objects. So they deny the existence of these things. Universities are cult indoctrination centers nowadays. Catherine, you pay to be brainwashed. What a scam. Yeah. Well, this is free, by the way, on my channel. So hopefully this is educational. Yeah, guys, by the way, if you do like this, please do like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, and also I don't run ads on my channel because I hate ads as much as you do. If you do like what I'm doing, by the way, let me just do something. Let me go here. Just a brief plug. If you do like what I am doing, please do support the channel. You can do so. I not every single one, but I'm starting to upload copies of all my presentations. This one is available right now for $5. The link is pinned in the chat if you guys would like to buy it. There's a description of it, and it's this one, and I have a bunch of others also available, right, for those who would be interested in following this along, using it at your talks or one of your social groups or your Bible studies and things like that, because these things impact the church. These things impact Christian belief. They impact all of us. These things have infested government, schools, the judiciary, and so on. So if you'd like to, you're welcome to purchase these here in my coffee shop. Link in the pin to the chat. And yeah, because I don't run ads on the channel, and so I don't earn any revenue that way. So let's see. My youngest informed me he was not going to college because he had figured out it was a waste of his time and money. He was 13. He's 20 now, with a good paying job and no debt. Smart guy, Tiger. Tigger. I bet your knuckles are smarter than my middle child. Thanks. Okay, yeah. So now, this concept of acquiring knowledge where humans possess the ability to learn about the material world and attain genuine understanding is contrary to materialists. And we're going to start to learn, as we delve deeper, how they reject the ability to collect data from the outside world. They reject that this is possible. So we will see this especially in modernist philosophies when we discuss Pius X. We're going to go more into this. So this is grounding that's leading us. I'm trying to draw a lot of threads together. Dead matter judges dead matter. Sounds logical. Yeah, of course, makes perfect sense. Just don't think about it. So materialist reductionism can be likened to woke deconstruction. or Marxist criticism. It involves reducing complex experiences like love or justice to merely survival instincts. These are just survival instincts. These just have there's the value of it. It just helps for survival. Not important. And this fails to truly comprehend the depth and the value of these concepts. Am I on Gab? I have an account, but I haven't been logged in ages. Is there a good reason to be on Gab? So there's a distinction between providing a genuine explanation for something and dismissing it as insignificant. Or in other words, there's a difference between explaining something and explaining it away. These people seem desperate to explain away reality and explain away, quite obviously, God. So if an explanation fails to sufficiently account for the nature of the thing that is being explained, the issue lies with the explainer, not with the thing itself. Again, if the explanation doesn't account for the nature of the thing being explained, the problem is with the guy doing the talking rather than the thing that he's talking about. Catherine M., thank you. I'm so glad. She says this info is absolutely priceless. I'm blown away. Thank you. Much appreciated. So instead of attempting to fit explanations into pre-existing materialist ideologies, a proper scientific approach would involve intellectual openness. We would embrace uncertainty. We would be guided by evidence to truly explore reality. Let's continue. So gaslighting you is a scientific worldview. Cascarabia says, just to let you know, Geert Wilders is rolling very good in the Netherlands. Yeah. Yeah, I was amazed at that. Okay, so the materialist worldview is that the idea of worldview is immaterial. So the materialist, so when atheist says it's not a worldview, we don't have a worldview, it's because it's materialistic, and worldviews are something that minds create, thoughts create. And of course, a rock can't have thoughts. A rock doesn't have purpose. A rock doesn't have intention. And it cannot have a worldview. So if you're just a piece of dead matter, inert matter, So the materialist worldview is that the idea of worldview is immaterial. Isn't that just circular nonsense? Now, this materialist worldview, so it has fundamental beliefs, right? So this worldview, this materialist worldview has fundamental beliefs that you hold about reality and that you apply to your experience. So they say the only things that exist are things you can touch, see, taste, smell, hold, kick, or do an experiment on, right? Yet beliefs are not material objects. So where are the beliefs coming from? That's a metaphysic. That is not physics. Those are metaphysical concepts. So they already are violating their own beliefs. And if you restrict them purely to material objects, these people are hamstrung. So remember, they tell us thoughts are illusions. So they are holding illusions. And we're going to get into this as we go through these various ideas. You're going to find out how they believe these thoughts are just illusions. Why are you biting my leg? Sorry, it's my survival instinct. Yeah. So how to counter them? Can they be observed? No. Can it be replicated? No. Therefore, it's scientifically false. Exactly. The belief that beliefs don't exist. Exactly. It's like Gorgias telling you that, man, this actually gets bizarre. As we do more of this stuff, you're going to start to see these ideas are bizarre. So consistent materialists say the self as we imagine it doesn't exist. So I've got someone who believes that he doesn't exist, writing books to tell me that I don't exist. So someone, an individual with a mind and a purpose, who is having metaphysical thoughts that he who is doing something and observing the world and responding to it does not exist. And he's writing books and producing videos to convince me and you that you do not exist either. Do you see Gorgias here? That deranged 6th century BC lunatic speaking as science? So yeah, this is bat crap crazy. It's dumb. So my purpose is to prove that there is no purpose. Exactly. They got it back-asswards. It's just so nuts. Now, so you have selves that are writing books to convince other selves that neither of them exist. Quite literally. And this is the dilemma of materialism in a nutshell. Joel Thomas, I'm pretty sure I do exist. You don't exist. Just empty your bank account, send them my way. You don't exist, buddy. But you don't, really. So I'm not sure about Nikola Tesla's worldview, but free energy was something that the materialists did not want. Okay, yeah, let's just stay on topic. So this is basically dehumanizing while claiming to be morally superior, intellectually superior. Yes, correct. Very well stated, Scarlett. Well, exactly. It is purely an attack on reason. It's an attack on logic. So now remember Gorgias, nothing exists, not even you. Take it from me. Gorgias said it. He was a Greek philosopher. You know how smart these dudes are. You don't exist, neither did he. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to try and get halfway through this, right? So we've got an hour and 5 minutes. So I'm going to try and I'm trying to get halfway to roughly 25 slides. Okay. So, but yes, it is dehumanizing. Do you understand how babies don't exist? You can kill all the little babies you want because they don't really exist. They're just dead matter anyway. Do you understand the moral implications? We'll go through this and you'll start to see the moral implications of this. We've already seen in my talk on Darwin how morally reprehensible these people are. So, yeah, they're just a clump of cells, but they're not. See, the clump of cells are just atoms, you see. But they're important. You're not, because they are the philosophers. They are the saints. They are the righteous. So, Raisa Tainan, welcome. Thanks for joining us. So yeah, guys, if you would like to support the channel I showed you, please do. You're welcome to purchase this, and please use this information. Grab pieces of it, make memes out of it, use it on your social media, educate people around you with it, use it in your Bible studies. This stuff is designed to attack the church. All of these things you'll find converges and attacks the church. And if you want to defend your faith, I think you need to understand the enemy that you're dealing with. So materialists like Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, they define science as the process of testing hypotheses against evidence and seeking observations or experiments that can confirm or contradict these hypotheses. Great. So they discuss the importance of following evidence. Fine and well. But imposing materialism on scientific inquiry limits the evidence that you're willing to consider. So by default, atheists will say, prove to me that God exists. But their worldview denies metaphysics by default. So how can they have, when only 5 cents things are considered real, matter extending into space is real, how can they ask you for theological or thought-based evidence when they are rejecting those things by default? Their worldview excludes those. It's like saying, look, I've got my telescope, I'm looking at Jupiter, and you're telling me there's such a thing as oceans on Earth and we have dolphins? I'm not seeing any dolphins. My telescope, I'm looking up at these stars, I don't see any dolphins. You're lying to me. I'm an atheist. I got a telescope. I'm looking at Jupiter and the moon. I'm seeing no oceans. Never seen any evidence of oceans through my telescope. I'm not seeing dolphins. I don't see any whales, shellfish, crabs. What are you talking about? Do you understand the issue here? This tool by default excludes the entire worldview that you're looking at. So how can they ask you for legitimately, in fair conscience, for evidence? Because they reject it to begin with. Understand the problem here. And even if they don't look at the world and say, hey, the world is amazing and was created, because remember Carl Sagan said, well, we're going to create a humanist religion that's going to view the world as awesome and amazing. Christians don't do that. God never did that. Oh my God, this church never did that. See, that was the opening statement that I made. So they'll mock philosophy as vain babblings. And now I know why. Yes. Catherine M., thank you for coming on. So, yeah. All right. So good ideas aren't the only ideas that survive. No, Andrew, bad ideas survive. They're like, yeah. So now, okay, now, materialism is death to scientific inquiry. It is a corruption of scientific inquiry, right? So it limits the evidence you're willing to consider. And this implies that evidence suggesting purpose in the universe, okay, what's called teleology in the material world, or the existence of a purposeful origin for the universe, will never be entertained. So by default, Roman H, thank you very much. Appreciate it. So in other words, they reject purpose because God has a purpose. God has a plan. That's a Christian teaching. God has a plan for the world. God has a plan for salvation. God has a plan for all of us. There's a Christian teaching. They reject that the world can have a purpose because the world is just matter, just atoms banging into atoms like stones knocking into stones on a landslide. Except, of course, then you've got these socialists and you've got Darwinists who believe in purpose. So they sneak it in. They need to have a purpose. They'll sneak it in a different way, but they'll use, because they reject the truth, because they reject the Logos, they will turn it in. So with Darwin, the purpose was the elevation of life through death. Marx, you've got historical materialism, and you've got to destroy what came before to bring the goodness, the amazing socialist world. And then eventually you have thesis, synthesis, blah, blah, blah. And you destroy what came before, and you have the new thing that elevates and elevates and elevates. and you've got these cycles. Do you understand? They sneak it in through the back door. They deny it here, but then they bring it in there. Understand? They're talking out of both sides of their mouth. Do you understand how they deny these things? They don't really. They need them. They just bring them in their own corrupt way because they reject the truth. So they've got to create a fiction. They have to create a fantasy. They have to lie. They have to make up a story about it. Stealing from God. Exactly, Pedro. Info was a scheduled to get shut down in January. That's a bit sad. So Thaddeus was the first big unveil, if I'm not mistaken. The Rob Christian's the next big. Okay, so I'm not sure what you mean by that, Thaddeus, by that, Nicodemus. Okay, sometimes bad ideas are maintained because they're easier to understand than the truth, e.g. Islamic monad versus the Trinity. Yeah, fair enough. Seems like Neil deGrasse Tyson has been floundering lately, trying to make the nonsensical sound even semi-rational. Yeah, no one's really buying his story much lately. So scientists have to be receptive to the idea that there might be evidence that speaks of a broader cosmic reality, a God, in other words. So the essence of natural science lies in a balanced approach. We want to be skeptical, but we want to be open-minded. We do not want to a priori reject data, reject evidence. And understand the atheist worldview by default, a priori, in advance, rejects your entire worldview, all of your evidence. Okay, so fear of the unknown can create the spiritual blindness. I think it's the old flesh versus spirit conflict. Okay, so this is in contrast to the deceptive portrayal of science through a materialist lens, which deviates from a genuine scientific spirit. It is a narrow, literally pagan worldview. It is an old, primitive, pagan worldview. So does materialism explain scientists? So scientists exceed the limits of materialism whenever they evaluate evidence. Materialists fail to recognize that their own reasoning, their own logical faculties, these are all metaphysical in nature, their own logical faculties. Good grief, I stumble over my words. These are metaphysical faculties. These are not material. These are not Lego pieces. So the scientific method relies on immaterial concepts, which is crazy. These materialists, these Lego building block fools, rely upon metaphysics like logic, mathematics, and reasoning, which all transcend the physical world. So they deny it, but they use it. Do you understand the stupid game they're playing here? And when you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. So when scientists evaluate evidence and they form hypotheses, they are using their mind, which they say doesn't exist. It's not real, it's an illusion. They're using their mental faculties, which they claim is an illusion, a delusion. They're not just using physical senses. So the mind, mental concepts, maths, and logic are metaphysical constructs. They're not physical things. Science points to the metaphysical, even if many material scientists fail to see it, or shall we say, refuse. So they make all these metaphysical presuppositions. They're not just taking physical data. And the existence of a scientist's mind and its capacity to understand logic and mathematical inferences, these are not observable. So they refuse. Yeah, it's refusal. So the scientific process itself contradicts the principles of materialism. So are thoughts just chemicals? Okay, so the brain and the physical body are connected to the mind in some ways, sure. But the relationship between the self, the soul, and the body is a difficult question. So next week, after I finish this particular presentation, I'll do another one going into the details here to show you the evidence against this idea. And it's actually really interesting. Modern science is starting to, shall we say, modern science has started to reinforce the Christian view. So what I want you to know is that these atheists, their ideas are being examined. They're being challenged. They're falling apart. We can trace them to paganism. This is primitive nonsense. And we can see that science is starting to show that the Christian worldview has validity. So this is not me trying to say the Bible is a science textbook. Okay, that is not the case. But we have a greater truth in terms of the metaphysics than do these idiots. I was watching an atheist recently having an open free will discussion about his belief in hard determinism. Yeah, yeah. So we will talk about that. We're going to get into hard determinism and free will as well. We're going to see where that comes from. Hint, it's a pagan idea coming from the pagans because everything is just matter colliding into matter. Identifying the brain as the self and the mind is actually misguided. We will see that. We'll discuss neuroscience next week or the week after, whichever comes first. Now, understand our understanding of the brain is extremely limited, even for flies, and especially for humans, right? So, but the idea that a thought is identical to a chemical reaction or a pattern in the brain, chemicals sloshing into each other in the brain, this doesn't make sense, and it's also been proven to be false. We cannot do a one-to-one correlation of a chemical reaction or a nervous firing, a synapse firing in the brain to thoughts happening in your mind. Oddly enough, that doesn't exist. So following the evidence to its logical conclusion is rational. Catherine M. So I didn't see Lloyd in the other channels, and if the FCC gets control of the internet, we will lose access. Oh yeah. Okay, now thoughts have the essential property of being about something. This is what is critical. I will discuss this more in a different episode. We'll talk about, but the critical property of thought is that thought can be about something. This is a bottle of water. This bottle of water cannot be about something. This bottle of water doesn't stop and think, I really want to go to Paris on a holiday. This bottle of water doesn't go, that's an interesting book lying on that desk. I'd like to read it. This thing doesn't look back and say, I think I'd like to learn how to play chess. Matter doesn't have thoughts, doesn't have purpose, right? Matter just decays. Thought has the critical property of being about something. We can think about things. We can encompass ideas. We can encompass purpose. That sets thought apart, and thought comes from a mind. Matter does not have this property. So to explain A, which is thought, in terms of B, a chemical reaction, both A and B need to have the respective properties, but they don't. The two are completely separate. Thought is different from what chemical reaction has thoughts about things. They don't. Understand? There's a fundamental problem here. So thoughts and chemical reactions are not the same thing. Now, let's get back into the pre-Socratic era. So I'll try and go for another few slides. So how long have I been going? Let me see. Good grief. How long have I been going? Can't tell, actually. Good grief. I'm sure there's a counter somewhere, but I just don't know where it is. So I started at 8:30. Oh, okay, so I'll go another 10 minutes. So, a number of early Greek philosophers, these pre-Socratic philosophers, were active before and during the time of Socrates. So they're known as pre-Socratic philosophers. Hour 15. I'll go like another 10 minutes. Their inquiries, of course, spanned the workings of the natural world, human society, ethics, religion, and so on. They started to bring order and sense to the world. But there were some idiots among them, too. Right? Now, they were looking for explanations based on natural principles. Now, here, of course, your materialist differs, and he's looking for material principles only, rather than the actions of supernatural gods. So they introduced to the West the notion of the world as a cosmos, an ordered arrangement that could be understood via rational inquiry. Now, if your mind was made by irrational, random, mechanical processes, how do you know any two minds are the same? Right? And how do you know that the universe is ordered if the universe is not based on laws, because the metaphysical laws don't exist? So now, the cosmos. Now, of course, this here is this book called Cosmos, okay, on and Serie A, Biologia. And of course, this is, what's it say here? Państwowe wydawnictwo naukowe. It's Polish. Okay. So, yeah, my Polish is terrible. Okay, so this is something called Cosmos. This is a very old theological, scientific journal. So Cosmos is a scientific journal devoted to Darwinism. It enjoyed the support of leading Darwinian biologists, including the fool called Haeckel and, of course, the psychopath called Darwin himself. So to the Stoics, now we talk about the Stoics. The Stoics, to them, the cosmos is a single pantheistic God, right? It is rational and creative and the basis of everything that exists. Now, there's some really excellent theories that I've heard about from people who are, so I would say, atheistic. They actually make a lot of sense, but they're taking from good philosophies, and then they'll have a hard stop. They will not take that step into going, well, God. Okay? They'll talk about everything before that step. So, now, to the Stoics, the cosmos is a single pantheistic God. It is rational, it is creative, and the basis of everything that exists. But of course, if God is in the world, God is not above the world, right? It's just another one of the pieces of creation. So the nature of the world is one of unceasing change. That's their view. It is driven by the active part or reason, the logos of God, which pervades all things. And the active substance of the world is characterized as a breath, or the pneuma, which provides form and motion to matter, and is the origin of the elements of life and human rationality. So you have the mind, and you have form, matter, Okay, form gives us function. Form gives us purpose. The form of something gives us purpose. You look at a shark, the shape of a shark. It is designed to survive in water. It's designed to be an apex predator. That's the form. You can see it's got teeth. It's thin. It's designed to be fast and sleek. So form gives us purpose, but only minds have purpose. So to them, nature is God. Nature has the purpose. Nature has the telos, right? So the notion that the universe is a rationally comprehensible totality is met often in Greek thought, right? And this is represented by the term cosmos, which means order or arrangement, right? In the New Testament, cosmos is used to refer to the world, the universe, the circle of the earth itself, and the inhabitants of the world, both literally and figuratively. So you've got the Greek root of the word cosmos and the New Testament version of cosmos, right? The universe. Now, 3 words: cosmogony, cosmology, and cosmos. Cosmogony and cosmology are rooted in the Greek word cosmos. This refers to the entire universe as an organized entity. Again, random atoms knocking into each other according to physical laws. How does that give us an organized entity? I don't know. Now, a cosmogony, which is cosmos plus genia, or birth, this is how the universe was formed. This is the Genesis tale. This is an account like Genesis, usually in the form of a mythological tale about the genesis or birth of the structured universe. So atheism needs a cosmogony, right? We have different stories within different cultures, different religions, and so on, about different cosmogonies, how the universe came about. So now, a cosmology is cosmos plus logia, or report. This is a blueprint or a map in the wider sense of the universe as a comprehensible and meaningful place. So the notion that the universe is rationally comprehensible is one that is common in Greek, used by cosmos. Now we get to Gnosticism. Of course, these Gnostics always crop up. These guys, back again. Now, Gnosis was connected with the reaction of the Orient against perceived Greek and Roman imperialism and exploitation. Thanks, Gnostics. And also, this is a protest against the social and political situation of the lower classes in Oriental communities. Oriental, in this case, is the old use of the term, the Middle East and Asian communities. So as an urban religious phenomenon, Gnosis was part of the social protest movement on the level of religious ideology. Back at it again with the Gnostics. I know, we always tend to come back to the same things. I don't know how this happens. Right? Something comes from nothing in the atheist mythology. Yeah, give us one free miracle, and then we'll explain all the rest. That's the atheist story. So these Gnostics, they are, one, they've got a political beef, and 2, they've got their own little beef against organized religion. So they come up with their own personal idea, fighting against the man, okay, on a religious level as well. So they come up with their own private, I want freedom, I want to be me, I want to have my own little anarchy here, right, my own little kingdom. So gnosis, this is a term rooted in the Greek word gnosis, which means nonsense, rubbish, complete trash, made up nonsense, okay, based on personal experience or perception. Notice it is subjective. In a religious context, it refers to the mystical or esoteric knowledge based on direct participation with the divine. Now that's a lovely sounding euphemism. It's mystical or esoteric knowledge based on my direct, hold on, hang on, just give me a moment. I'm having a mystical communion and direct communication with God. I can feel Him. Like the Holy Spirit is convicting me. It's bathing me. I am being slain in the Spirit. Right? Ooh, can you guys feel it? You can't. No. It's just me. I'm special. I'm getting special. Oh yeah, God's told me to. Yeah, guys, you need to send me. I'm African. I like fried meat, chicken. So it's telling you to send me fried. That was direct from the Word of God. So there you go. Do you understand? It's subjective. You can make it up, and of course, that's exactly what they did. So Gnosticism was a response to the social and political situation in the Orient. Albert is texting me one moment. It was just a reminder. Sorry. Exactly. That's Albert. Albert was like, I heard Albert's voices in my head. So there you go. It's Albert. Understand, this is a personally subjective. It's basically turning your back on society, making up your own thing. You don't tell me. This is a 5-year-old throwing a tantrum. Nya. That's exactly what this Gnosticism was historically, right? So salvation by Gnostic faith alone. So we'll end off here. I think this is a good place to end off. Let's talk about salvation by faith alone, known as sola fide. Might be familiar. Let's see if that has a pagan origin. Let's find out if Martin Luther got his ideas from some pagan philosophers. Right, so thank you very much, Nat. I appreciate the support. Thank you. So, Gnosticism represents now a new individualistic ideology. I make it up my way. No one can tell me. I'm my own little pope, right? I made up my own church and my own religion. No one can tell me. This is where we are at. Now, it is even a certain, shall we say, a democratized connection to God through the idea of a divine spark in every human. You get rid of the priestly class. You get rid of the church. You see, everyone's now his own church and his own pope. You see, you can't tell me I'm wrong because the Holy Spirit talks to me. Oh, I can feel the Holy Spirit. Do you understand? You cannot falsify that. You cannot reason against that, because how can you tell them they're wrong? Because this is God talking to them. What the heck? Okay. So yes, it's feelings. So now what Gnosticism does, it elevates the self-recognition of the individual. Like, right? I did it my way. Yeah, except these guys are doing it sideways. Right? So it elevates the self-recognition of individuals who have become conscious of their autonomy and their independence from worldly ties, including official religions. But remember, these people become ascetics and they turn their back on the world. They deny the world. They deny participation in the world. They will not participate and enjoy the goodness of the world that God made. And on the other hand, they also become complete hedonists. They go ape. They go crazy, right? They go wild because they don't believe they are bound by any of the rules of the world that God made. So both of these are a reaction against the world. Now the world, the cosmos, was seen as an area of disorder, not ruled by reason or logos, as in Greek philosophical thought. Gnosis was in this way very different from the other religions. It was an evil world made by an evil God, and they were good souls. They were parts of God. A piece of God was trapped in them, and so they were the good, trapped in this evil, dark, ugly, disgusting conspiracy theory world. Now, its soteriology, or its doctrine of salvation, was very closely linked to a strict attitude of world denial, which is the most radical of all of these ideas in all of antiquity. These guys were very much against, right, the world, right? Remember, we have in Genesis, God made the world and it was good. To them, an evil God attacked the good God. Parts of the good God fell into this evil, dark world of matter that was made by the evil God, Yahweh, the demon God that made the black God, that made the world, and we need to kill ourselves so we can all go back to merge and take our little pieces of our godliness and merge it with the original God and overcome the bad God, and that's the whole story. So now you've got this doctrine of salvation is linked to a strict attitude of world denial. Now, some common questions in studying soteriology include, how is salvation obtained? We have to ask ourselves, how is salvation maintained? Okay? How is salvation understood? What role does faith play in the process of salvation? Right? These are questions, if you're going to study soteriology, you've got to have answers to these questions. And how does the concept of salvation vary across different religious traditions? All important questions. So let's continue. Now, actually, I'll do answer this later. Okay, yeah. So you know what? Maybe I should end here because I know I haven't answered the question. But what they're saying is the world is evil. So short version, the world is evil. You are denying the world. There's an evil God who controls an evil world. It doesn't matter what you do because the world is random. The world's irrational, right? It's an erratic world. You are the only truth. What you feel, your subjective values are the only truth. Therefore, nothing outside you exists, nothing outside you matters. There's only your truth. Understand? Oprah's your truth. Therefore, only your faith, only your belief can save you, because that's a universe out there that doesn't matter, right? Nothing matters except what you think. What you do is irrelevant because once you die, there's going to be whatever. You understand? It's completely incoherent, but it relies on your thoughts alone, your ideas alone, your faith and belief alone. There's no actions. There's no sacraments. There's nothing good. outside. So then you start to get this idea of faith alone. But we'll discuss that. Let me do. Actually, let me talk about this briefly. Okay. No, actually, let me end here. This is a good spot. This is a good spot. We're halfway, and I'll end here. Briefly speaking, what have you guys learned from this? What did you take away? Has this been helpful? So we're trying to understand the origins of some of these ideas that have become what we call scientific today. And we'll see they're not scientific, they are pagan. So I need to get into this. So Gnostics have their own personal beliefs, and they will be saved by these own beliefs of theirs. So yeah, guys, so your thoughts, I would love to know. And if you have additional thoughts, drop them in the comments later. But any last questions before I go on? Yeah. So do you understand? But this idea is in complete. These ideas are in complete opposition. If nothing outside you exists, if everything's illusion, then only what you do matters. Only what you believe matters. And therefore, if you then have nothing else to anchor yourself on, you're going to anchor yourself on your own illusions, and you're going to do self-serving things. You're going to say, well, my thoughts count, my thoughts matter, I'm right. And therefore, that's your faith alone. Yeah, I do. Yeah, once you look at the perspective, and as we go through this, we're going to start to see how this all starts to connect. I have to restart the video, or I arrived too late. Yeah, I normally just watch on 1.75 speed. Yeah, Gnostic ideas everywhere, practiced by pagans too. Yeah, you'll find all sorts of shades of these ideas. So let me end here, and we will talk about this next time. So yeah, I will be doing a show on Sunday with Thunderous One. On Monday, I'm supposed to be doing a talk with Kennedy Hall. I'll be talking about, on his channel, I will be talking about Darwin. And then I'll try and I'll do part 2 of this on Tuesday and finish these slides. And then I'll do another section after that to talk more about materialism from a different angle, and to see just how scientifically it's completely backwards. So the psychopathic way of viewing the world, yeah, I'd agree with that. The twisting of words, I see the connection with Islam. I remember from your Freemason talk, the connection with Egypt and the word magic. Yes. Yeah, which we kind of touch on. If I go here, which we'll kind of touch on here. And yeah, occult forces and so on and so on. They connect all of this, the world, with occult forces and so on. Yeah, they try and reinterpret everything. Okay, guys, so we'll call it a night. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you've found some value in this, and have a wonderful rest of your Thanksgiving. Have a good weekend. I'm going to go see Napoleon tomorrow. That should be interesting. See how that goes. And have a great weekend, guys.